Hello and welcome to episode 142 of Page One, the Writers Podcast. I'm Tarek.
And I'm Marco, and thanks for joining us on the podcast where we like to speak to writers of all kinds about their writing careers, find out how they got into the industry and try and get as many hints and tips from them as possible. And we have got a massive back catalogue there, episode 142, so we've spoken to a lot of authors, screenwriters, video game writers, comic writers, so hopefully there's someone in that back catalogue that will be of interest to you, so please do check that out if you haven't already. But
we just finished a fantastic run of industry episodes.
We have, just a few episodes ago.
Agents and editors.
Mm-hmm. And those episodes are available as video interviews as well on our YouTube channel.
It's the future, Marco.
It is. But this week we've got another great guest on.
Yeah, this week we're chatting with Kirsty Eyre, who's written a number of comedy books. Cowgirl was her first novel. It won the Comedy Women in Print Award, which Eagle Eye listeners might remember as a award that was started up by a previous guest of ours.
Yeah, Helen Lederer.
Helen Lederer, that's right. And she went on to write a number of other books since then under pseudonyms. Ginger Jones wrote You Had Me at Halloumi, and What the Focaccia comes out next year.
Yes, very food-based puns as novel titles, which we do chat about in the episode. And yeah, it's really interesting speaking to Kirsty because she started out actually sort of helping someone write pantos, and then kind of caught the bug, moved on to sort of writing plays at the Edinburgh Fringe, and eventually she went on one of the Curtis Brown writing courses, which we've spoken to so many of our guests.
A few folk have
done them, and they do genuinely seem to be helpful courses. She did that, and from that course, managed to get the inspiration to write Cowgirl, and obviously went on to great success with that. And then we chatted to her about why, after winning that award under her own name, she decided to use a pseudonym for her following books. But those have been successful as well. So, and I think pseudonyms can be useful if you're wanting to write a slightly different type of book from the original one. It lets you explore more with your writing.
I think that's right, and certainly for these books, I think her food-based pun books under the Ginger Jones name are definitely a bit more spicy.
Yes,
it's perhaps the word I would use.
I think so. I like the food analogy you've got there.
I didn't realise that. Of course, that's right.
Anyway,
we're seasoning.
Exactly. We'll get a bit more saucy even. I mean, we could.
Why did I go for saucy? That's much better than seasoning. I don't know what seasoning even means. But we're salty.
We can continue with these terrible food-related puns all episode, but instead we'll get straight into the episode after a quick advert for our writer's notebook, and then we'll be back at the end of the episode with a bit more chat and to let you know about next week's guest.
But for now, on with the podcast.
The blank page. To some, it's terrifying, an obstacle to overcome. But we prefer to think of it as an opportunity, a blank canvas to be filled with all of the adventures and characters in our head. So how to overcome that fear? Well, we all know the best advice for a writer is write. Seriously, get words on the page and more will follow.
But what about later, when you start trying to pull those threads of what you've written together? What about the character you wrote about way back at the start? Who was she again? What was she carrying? And where did she leave the MacGuffin that she now really needs in the third act? Think about all those top thrillers you like to read, or that amazing drama you just watched. What did they all have in common? Structure and planning.
As aspiring writers ourselves, we've tried many different methods to try and organise all the thoughts about the stories we want to tell. We've been there searching for a piece of scrap paper to note something down, or making a quick note on our phone in between meetings.
Or sometimes we'll make a note in whatever notebook we're carrying, or a document on our laptop so we don't forget that great idea. Let's be honest, it can all be a bit messy and it's easy to lose track of everything. And that's when we realise it's not just a story that needs structure and planning, but the way we gather all of our thoughts about it as well.
And so we made Page One. Page One is more than just another notebook. It's a place to put down all your ideas for your latest project, divided into easy-to-use sections that will help you plan your story, so that when that blank page comes calling, you're ready to answer. And then afterwards, once it's written, we realised you need to plan how to let people read it, so we included a section relating to submissions.
Each one is designed for one project, whether you want to write a book, screenplay, a comic, or any other kind of story. We truly believe that when you use it, it will help you get to the main event, writing your story. So we hope this helps.
We can't wait to read what you come up with.
And remember, every story starts with page 1.
Did you always want to be a writer? Because I know before you started writing novels, you were writing for the stage.
Yeah. So, well, just rewind to my childhood. I think, first of all, I wanted to be an ice skater. Then I wanted to be a famous gymnast. Then I wanted to be a PE teacher that spoke French just so I could go on French exchanges.
Specific.
Very specific.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had all these whimsical ideas about what I might do when I'm older. And then I basically found writing, or it found me, in my late 20s when I kind of budded up with one of my friends who was working for Eurostar, who used to sponsor an annual pantomime that used to be put on in a tiny little theatre under the eaves of Waterloo Station in London. And Stefan, absolutely brilliant wordsmith, but writing in a second language, found it quite difficult to nail the humour in pantomime. So I co-wrote with him.
Okay.
And then it led to us writing, I think we did 3 pantomimes like each year. We'd do one, but it got quite restrictive having to write about a Eurostar. So I think we had Murder on the Eurostar Express, we had Eurostar Academy, and then I think I did one called Cattle Class. And then I just thought, I can't write about people on a train anymore.
Yeah.
So I turned my hand to writing stage plays, which then went on the Edinburgh Fringe circuit. Really enjoyed that. And then kids came along and I realised I was no longer in the game for rehearsing and performing kind of evenings and weekends, because I used to direct them as well. And then I remember being really bleary-eyed and sleep-deprived after my second baby, thinking I really need to find something that doesn't involve a cast and a crew. And yeah, turn my hand to a novel. I make it sound really easy, and it really wasn't.
Well, I mean, I want to ask, because you kind of brushed over it and just said, I just kind of wrote some stuff that did the Edinburgh, the Fringe Festival. But how did you get stuff? How does that happen? Was this the theatre company that you set up? Were you writing your material and then getting out? How did you get out there?
First of all, I became associated with an amateur dramatics group that had the luxury of having their own theatre. And this was the little theatre, network theatre at Waterloo. And I used to, direct plays there. And I remember I'd written this show called Class, and it was about 5 strippers who were just kind of lost in the mundanity of shopping lists and things like that as they were taking their clothes off. So it was always comedy. And somebody said to me, this is just the sort of thing that would do well at the Edinburgh Fringe. And I'd never even been as a punter. So next year I went as a punter. The following year I took, it was called Class. Very classy, as in the C and the L were black and the AWS were in red. Not maybe that classy. And went up to Edinburgh Fringe, and then I got hooked. I absolutely love Edinburgh Fringe. I saw so many shows there. I think my first play, Class, the audience numbers weren't that great. We were performing in an old church in the evening. It was a really great experience, though. Met so many great people. And then I went on to take plays that I discovered that I should take fewer props and have a much less complicated set. Because you have to really tight get in and get out, and the more black box type shows you can put on, the better. Really, really enjoyed it. Yeah.
And you were obviously writing comedy writing, which your novels are as well. But when you're writing that for the stage in particular, I suppose you're getting kind of immediate feedback on whether what you've written is funny or not. I mean, is it a sort of sink or swim situation in that?
Very much. So I find that, first of all, you have that initial hearing your play being performed for the first time, maybe in rehearsals, and you're just thinking, damn it, that line was funny. Why is no one laughing? When you've just got a really small audience. And then an actor will get a laugh out of something that you didn't necessarily think was funny. So it works both ways. But then having an audience in and having like the ability to do previews. So I used to preview the show for a week in the small theatre in London. And then the money that I take on the box office used to pay the actors to get their train fares up to Edinburgh. But yeah, it's such a lovely sense of atmosphere when you're in a theatre, and you do get that immediate feedback, and you're amongst the crowd and you can see them reacting, whether it's out loud or, you know, chuckles and guffaws or a minor little titter. Yeah.
Although presumably, does it change night to night? You know, are there some nights where you know the material works because it's worked other nights, but it just isn't landing with that particular audience or something?
Yeah, and also the actors, I find sometimes they'll just have a night where they're just feeling the burn a bit, and maybe the performance is a bit flat. So it goes both ways. It's like the relationship you have with the performers and the audience is quite interesting.
And this whole time when you were writing for stage, did you have an agent at all, or were you just out there by yourself?
No. And you asked me earlier, Tarek, if I set up a stage production company, and I did. So basically I set up a limited company and called it Class Stage Productions. And it just allowed me to market myself through a website and have Class Stage Productions.
Yeah.
And recruit a cast and crew. But no, I didn't have an agent at the time. And the first time I got an agent was through the book.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so if we move towards the book writing, am I right in saying that you did one of the Curtis Brown writing courses?
Yeah, that's right. So I did the 3-month Curtis Brown novel writing course. So I was one of 15 people.
Yeah.
It was really good. I mean, they promote it as meet the agent, kind of meet their agents at the end of it. But the course itself was invaluable, just in terms of everything that you get from a creative writing course, but top tips in terms of what not to do as well as to do. So I found that really useful, the Curtis Brown creative course.
Yeah, we've had a few guests on that have done it, and it does seem to be genuinely very helpful, not just for the meeting of the agents, but also in terms of developing your writing and stuff like that. So you decided to write this book. Was Cowgirl the first thing that you started writing, or was that something that came later?
Cowgirl was the first thing I started writing, but it wasn't called Cowgirl at the time.
Right, okay.
I think the earlier draft was called Billy's Blog. And I was so used to writing dialogue as part of writing for the stage that was where my comfort levels lay. And so I just thought, how can I cheat about writing description? I felt not that confident in writing big blocks of description. I thought, I know what, I'll write it in diary format or a blog format, and then I can just do kind of note format and then slip into dialogue. But then the feedback at Curtis Brown was, Kirsty, nobody writes a diary anymore. Well, it's very rare that you do. And Bridget Jones's diary has been done before and will never be paralleled. So I think this needs to be straight narrative. So I rewrote the whole thing. And it wasn't until later that I came up with Cowgirl.
It's funny because that's an interesting approach for them to have said, because I've definitely read books recently where they kind of are moving away from just a kind of normal-ish book, and it's more like a diary entries or found footage type material that has been recovered, and it's presenting it in a different way. So it's interesting that they
emails and things like
emails and stuff, email chains and stuff, or text messages. It's interesting that they were trying to push you away from that back into traditional stuff. Is that changing, you think?
I think it is changing, because the novel I've just handed into my agent at the moment is actually written as WhatsApp form.
Oh, cool. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, I just think there's all sorts of media you can play with.
Yeah.
And the more you chop and change, the better. And people want something new. It's just sometimes you have to cheat the system a little bit, if you know what I mean. Like, for example, writing in WhatsApp format, you probably end up with a bit of like a headache if you really make them the proper appropriate size of a WhatsApp message. And you have to cheat it a bit and extend it a bit. But yeah, I think it has changed.
And when you were writing, obviously you were then told to write it in a more traditional style. And how did you find that compared with writing scripts? Because obviously you tried to cheat your way and you'd gotten caught and you were your wrist slapped and now you were back. So how was it? Was it hard?
It was tough. I realised that there are no real shortcuts, are there, with writing? And every time I approach a new novel, I don't know about you guys, but I tell myself that I'm going to do it really differently next time. Next time, I'm going to like lay out the whole novel. I'm going to do the structure. I'm going to be a plotter rather than a pantster. And then every single time, I do my own thing all over again. Yeah.
But it obviously works for you, though. So
Yeah.
yeah. And when you were working on Cowgirl then, and you had a version of that you were happy with, did you then try and get agents at that point? Was it through Curtis Brown that you got an agent, or how did that work?
It wasn't through Curtis Brown that I got an agent. The biggest thing I got from Curtis Brown was a really good set of fellow writers who would buddy up with me as beta readers, who I'm in touch with today and think they're all great. That has been invaluable. But the agent thing came about more when I think I tried early days to pitch Billy's blog as it was pre-Curtis Brown course. And then once I'd restructured it and renamed it to become Cowgirl, I entered it into the Comedy Women in Print Prize. That was early 2019, and was lucky enough to be longlisted. And as soon as I got a sniff at longlist level, I thought, right, now is my time to pitch to agents, and I can quote it in my pitch letter, which is what I did. And the other thing I found really great in terms of looking for an agent was London Writers Club, who used to traditionally just be in London because it used to be face-to-face in person, but has now transferred to be online. And they hold monthly events with agents. And I find that that is a lovely in, first of all, for you to meet an agent and understand what sort of writers they represent. But also, it's a great in when you're writing your pitch letter and you can say, oh, it was great to meet you at London Writers Club.
Yeah.
Which is what I did at the time.
So does that work as a sort of, is it a sort of social gathering, or does the agent come along and give a bit of a talk, or how does that work?
They have different types of events and offer different services as well. But predominantly it's agent speakers.
Right.
And they might have publisher speakers and industry speakers. Yeah.
And not only did you get longlisted for the Comedy Women in Print Award, you actually won it. Am I right?
Yeah.
Yeah, which is very exciting. I mean, that must have been a real kind of validation that you were writing something which was, worthwhile.
Yeah.
Or
it was 2019 was amazing. And when I look back on it, they were quite sneaky, actually, really good in a good way. And bless Helen Lederer for coming up with the Comedy Women in Print Prize.
Yeah.
So it was the first time they'd run it in 2019. It was the inaugural one. And I'd been shortlisted. I didn't get tipped off that I'd won it. And so I had asked whether or not I could take a +1. And I got this email back saying, sorry, we're really oversubscribed. Do you still want to come? For the waiting list. And I was thinking, well, that's not exactly winner chicken dinner, is it? So I just thought, well, sod this. There's no way I'm missing out on this because there were.
That's a bold thing. What if you'd said no?
I don't know. They were playing it really cool.
I know.
Yeah. So I turn up thinking that, looking at the other shortlistees, thinking, well, she's definitely won. Like, you wouldn't wear that dress unless you'd won. And then I went on what I couldn't believe it. It was what dreams are made of.
Really incredible for your first novel. And one of the things about that award is all about comedy writing, but I always think that being able to write a book that makes people laugh is a very difficult thing to do, because you don't have the audience that you have for a comedy film or a theatre, a stage production or something around you and laughing, where the atmosphere is always like getting you into the mood to laugh. But when I've read books that actually make you laugh out loud, it really is something unique and special, I think. And do you make yourself laugh when you're actually writing it? Is that how you know that it's landing right? Do you show it to people? How do you make sure the comedy's working in it?
It's such a good question, because obviously humour is so subjective, and what you find funny, I won't, and vice versa, and all the rest of it. But and also there's different ways of being funny on the page, isn't there? So you can have like the satire the slapstick. You
Yeah.
can have just the tone, like the humorous tone. I still find that I think, like when I come up with a comedy sketch, I do think of it as a sketch.
Right.
And
Okay.
this is probably one of my weaknesses as well, where I haven't fully fleshed out the whole book. I just get an idea for a character in a funny situation and think of it as a sketch, as if it was being performed on TV. And then kind of think, oh, yeah, I quite like that character. I'm going to stick with that one. And then write the book around that.
Mm-hmm.
The other book that I'm writing at the moment is about three sisters. And I'd like to think that it's comedy all the way through, but they each have got a different style of comedy. One is a frazzled mother, and it's just all the things that go wrong that you probably would be able to relate to if you were a frazzled parent. And then a very pretentious one who is, I think you can use the lack of self-awareness as good comedy, where you're showing one thing and telling another. So your dialogue might be saying one thing and the actions might be contradicting it in a playful way. I love a good misunderstanding as well, or a language barrier, I think makes for good comedy. But yeah, sometimes it's more about the tone. And one of the notes that I always get as well is, and it's quite a pressure, having won a comedy prize, to then be just absolutely hilarious all the time. And obviously I'm not. And so I'll hand things in and they'll go, Kirsty, it's just missing that lightness of touch, which is a lovely euphemism for it's not quite funny enough. And,
No problem. I'll just add that back in.
Yeah. So I find that I have to kind of write the whole thing a bit more serious and then froth it up a bit after.
Right. Okay.
Right. Okay. I mean, and how many drafts does it take you now? And do you find that you're getting it quicker as you go on?
I thought it was getting quicker until I've been looking at this recent book. I think it depends what you're writing, and I find that I write also under a pseudonym as Ginger Jones, which is a little bit of a different audience. I feel that is a bit frothier, a bit lighter, and that's hence the pseudonym. And I find that one, they're more like holiday romances.
Okay.
That as long as I know who my characters are and where they're set, I can normally come up with a plot, and I seem to get faster at writing holiday rom-coms. But give me something absolutely new, like a WhatsApp type framework, or three sisters writing from three different points of view. I'm finding my way all over again with it.
And are you, going back to I suppose the humor side of it, and whether it lands or not, do you show it to anyone? Do you, to try and get their judgment as to whether or not it's working before you send it to your agent or editor?
Yeah, so first and foremost, I send it to my husband, who is a fellow author, and make sure that I'm just outside of the room, but like we're going to see if he chuckles. And I'm thinking, damn it, like I'm sitting on my hands thinking he hasn't laughed yet.
Is that horrible? I have those stress moments. It's always when I say to someone, "Oh, this is a really good film. We'll watch this. It's really good." And you spend more time watching their face to see if why aren't they laughing at the point, which I think is really funny. It's a stressful moment to have, I think.
Yeah. And then I also, I was saying that I met some really good writers on the Curtis Brown creative course. I'm still in touch with them, and normally we'll send it to a couple of people from that group as well to beta read, and I find that really, really helpful.
Nice.
And you said that despite your best efforts to be a plotter, you're very much a pantser in terms of your writing style.
Yeah.
I mean, how much do you try and plot down? Do you just have this idea for a character in a situation and just see where it takes you, or do you have a sort of ending in mind, but just let the writing take you there? To what extent are you a complete pantser?
That's a really good question. I think I'm the sort of person that writes a shopping list and then leaves it on the kitchen table and then finds myself in Lidl thinking, now what was on the shopping list? And it's really similar with
That's cute,
writing.
I like that, yeah.
Really, really similar. So I deviate a lot. So I will try and shoehorn my entire plot into a really draft synopsis. And then, but I've probably got the idea in the first place from a scene that's popped into my head.
Yeah.
But then I'll quite often deviate from the synopsis and then have to retrospectively update it. And I find that I'm updating the synopsis and the novel in parallel. Yeah. And quite often, I don't know what the ending is. And I don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, but quite often it's the ending that I sometimes have to struggle with. Less so on the rom-coms when romance is the arc, but on the more complicated plots. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I wanted to ask you about your subsequent books, the kind of rom-com stuff, because as you mentioned, you wrote those under a pseudonym, Ginger Jones, and I wondered why you chose to do that after having won the award and your name. I would have thought you'd want to capitalize on your name, but you chose to go down the opposite route. Why was that?
I just had an opportunity that was presented to me where through my agent I had an opportunity to write under a pseudonym for Bonnier, and this came along, of course. When Cowgirl came out, and which was my debut, it all clashed with the awful 2020. Everything was struck down by COVID. Do you remember when the whole process had ground to a halt with books and people didn't really know what was going to move, and people were trying to socially distance in the warehouses of packing books, and the whole thing had ground to a halt. And I remember just not really knowing what was going on because Cowgirl kept getting delayed just in terms of the release. And I remember the actor who was going to read the audio version couldn't access the the voice studio because that was locked up because of COVID.
Jeez.
And I just thought, bring it on. Let's just write some holiday romances as a bit of escapism.
Yeah.
And put what I was writing as Kirsty Eyre on the back burner. And so when I previously mentioned the Goddesses of Barnsley, I didn't come up with the title before, but the Three Sisters one, that is 60,000 words on my hard drive at the moment, alongside another WhatsApp one that's gone into my agent. So I'd like to think that I've still got the two things running. I just deviated a bit just with everything that happened.
And when you're writing those different styles of books, how easy is it to move from one voice to the other? Because obviously they do have a different feel, and the structure of them different and everything like that. Is it easy enough to become Ginger Jones when you're writing the rom-com ones?
Yeah, ironically, I do think that bit is quite easy. So the funny thing is, though, is when you're first of all choosing your pseudonym name, have you ever done that little exercise where you have to find your porn name and they say something
your first
like
pet or something?
Yeah, your first pet and then a flower or something like that. So I was brainstorming pseudonyms with my agent and was thinking of, right, okay, the first name needs to be like spicy, hence the ginger.
Yeah.
And then we were thinking of a bit of a alliteration, like a superhero. And I think I went a bit over the top with the surname at one point, and then she was going, "No, I think you need to rein it in and go with something a bit more." So Ginger Jones it was. But when I was writing the bio for Ginger Jones, I'd prefixed it with me being a redhead, and I did actually dye my hair red. I know that sounds really pretentious, but I did dye my hair red and felt a bit Ginger Jones when it all came out. And I was first of all writing about Cyprus and have since written about Italy, but places that I've never been to before, these specific places in Italy and Cyprus. And it was fresh escapism when you really needed it. And in the background, I was homeschooling some very disillusioned children, and life was grinding to a bit of a halt. So it was just a welcome diversion.
Yeah, it sounds almost like we've spoken to some stand-up comedians and stuff on the podcast before, and there's this idea of like the character that they have on stage isn't. Certainly, some of them have a character that they act out on stage, and it almost makes it easier for them to tell the jokes that they want to tell and stuff like that. If it was just them, then they'd find it slightly more difficult. I mean, does being Ginger Jones enable you to write in a different way, perhaps?
Yeah, I think so. So Ginger Jones, I think she's 10 years younger than I am. And she hangs out with her dog, who often gets referenced on Instagram.
So do you have to create a whole backstory for this? I never thought that before, but you create a whole kind of fake bio for this person.
Not massively. I think at some point I forgot to delete my children in the bio.
Okay.
Generally, Ginger doesn't mention her children. She normally mentions her dog. Yeah. But yeah, obviously it's still all the same, really, but it's quite good fun, really.
Well, because I read an interview with you that said that the sort of saucier scenes in You Had Me at Halloumi were almost easier to write because it was Ginger writing them than Kirsty writing them, if you see what I mean.
Yeah, I think so. And then when you are writing saucy scenes as part of a rom-com, I do have it into my head that my 10-year-old boy is not going to be that on board with it all when he picks up one of my books. So I'm hoping to blame that on Ginger.
But if he never knows who Ginger Jones is, then it's fine. Exactly. Well, as Marco mentioned, it's called You Had Me at Halloumi. Why don't you tell us a bit about what the book is about?
Yeah, so You Had Me at Halloumi came out in April this year, and it's a holiday romance based in Cyprus. Around a girl, Freya, who ditches her job in a Mediterranean restaurant based in Nottingham to embark on a quest for the Golden Spoon, which is a coveted chef's prize that you can only win in very rare circumstances. The journey takes her to Cyprus, and it chronicles her journey as a chef. So it's a little bit of a whodunit in terms of who's spiking the food. It's a bit of a like playful characters with a bit like a reality TV show with her competition and who she's up against. And then in the background there is a romance that takes place. And
Nice.
will she or won't she win the Golden Spoon? That's the question.
Yes, indeed. And then there's I think the next book in the series, you said it was in Italy. It's called What the Focaccia, I think. I mean, I like this. Have you got a whole series of food-related names for potential future books written down somewhere?
I just think the cheesier the better. I can't remember. Yeah, we've done loads of like puns with cheese. I just feel like I should probably do a German one. I'm just trying to think now.
You would a German kind of sauerkraut. I'm trying to think of German food.
Yeah, don't be such a sauerkraut.
There you go.
Yeah, we had real good fun with that.
Yeah, I can see that.
Very
And
cheesy.
you said that obviously you are still writing other books apart from the Ginger Jones books. I mean, do you have, in terms of actual book deals and stuff, obviously the Ginger Jones ones, you've got 2 books lined up there, or one's out already. Do you have book deals already for your own ones in place, or are these things that are still to be pitched?
The Goddesses of Barnsley, I've been offered a contract with One More Chapter, a digital platform.
Nice.
And then the dog book, no, that one is unsolicited and has to go through the whole pitch process. So that'll be really interesting.
And so is your hope that you would, in the future going forward, you kind of keep these dual lives just running and have that kind of outlet for the fun, frothy stuff, and then the more kind of semi-serious stuff? Is that your kind of your goal?
Yeah, I think realistically it depends how they sell as to
Yeah.
whether or not, I'll be offered anything beyond the 2 with Bonnier. But ideally, yeah, that would be lovely. Like I do have a few more ideas up my sleeve. One at some point I really like to write a Christmas rom-com. I know that is
Nice.
very seasonal and all your sales would be, in the lead up to Christmas. But I'd still like to do that. The reality though, guys, is that I do still work in a bank as a comms person, 3 days a week, keeping it real Yeah, so it would be lovely if one of these channels took off.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, but I was texting. I think it was on Twitter. Was it last week that someone was saying that, becoming a full-time author is such a difficult thing to do. I think someone had said they'd sold 45,000 books, which is a lot of books, and they were just making 30 grand off that. So it's a long haul, and so many of our guests have to. You're juggling the writing with everything else, not just with the home life, which is difficult enough, but also with another job. It's a very difficult thing to do. And in your case, you're having to be two people as well, which is even more difficult.
Yeah. Although I also do think it keeps you grounded, because obviously, as you both know, like, writing is quite solitary.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And
Definitely, yeah.
have you ever done one of those psychometric tests when you have to work out whether you're an introverted extrovert or an extroverted introvert and all that good stuff? I think I'm on the cusp. And so I do find a good bit of human interaction does me good. And I do also find that when I'm just in the writing world, if for example, I take 2 weeks off work to finish a book because I've got a looming deadline and I'm living and breathing writing novels, I get really forgetful and go all a bit into la la land. And I'm not really got my head screwed on right. And I do find the day job does anchor me in that way.
Yeah. And that kind of, that, as you said, that kind of solitary job, would that make you want to go back and perhaps try writing for TV or stage again, do that in that kind of more collaborative stuff?
I'd love to, yeah. At the moment, I don't have any ins on the TV circuit, but yeah, maybe that is something I'd like to look at. And more recently as well, like as I've been like ferrying the kids around, I find myself listening to Radio 4 and some of the stage plays that are on there. And I just thought maybe a radio play. Maybe a radio play would be a nice one as well.
Also, like, what do they call them? Narrative podcasts or fictional podcasts? I don't know what the correct title is, but they're very big at the moment as well. So I suppose that's the thing. There's a lot of options for writers these days, but the field itself is incredibly crowded. So it still seems a very difficult thing to break into or make a success of, I think.
Yeah. Although I read with delight about your success, Tarek.
Oh, thank you very much.
Yeah, with the bloody Scotland debut prize. Well done.
Thank you. Yeah, no, as you were saying, it is nice to kind of get that independent verification that you've done something a bit folk-like, which is nice. Yeah,
it is, isn't it?
Also unexpected for you, Tarek, I think, on the night.
Because they don't say anything, and it was probably the better way, because I'd rather not know and then kind of be nicely surprised rather than be told. I suppose, well, they wouldn't tell you if you hadn't won it, I suppose. They would just tell you if you had won it. Then you always have that doubt in the back of your mind, like, they didn't say anything, does that mean someone else has won the award? But but they were good, because they were very upfront and said, we don't tell anyone if you've won it or not in advance. So I was like, okay, that's fine. So I know that now, which is good. And they didn't make any kind of awkward, are you sure you want to come along to this, or do you want to just... It's probably no point you even coming tonight, Tarek. Just stay home.
I also had this really cringe scenario where, because of COVID and lockdown, Cowgirl had also got shortlisted for the RNA Debut Award. So it's sponsored by Katie Ford. And there was myself and the other shortlistees all in this Zoom call. And we've been told to wait in this breakout room, and that they would announce the winner, and that they would then take the winner out of the breakout room put you on the main Zoom call, and just to be ready. Anyway, first of all, the tech didn't work, and everything just slowed down, and we were in there. I think most of us had got a drink in our hands and were quite merry by the time it did come to our category. And then there was another tech problem, and they only moved the winner out, and then the rest of us all got dropped. So, but because we couldn't hear the main body of the call, we didn't know that they were announcing it. So we just got dropped. And the next thing I know is my boy running into the room just going, "Mummy, you didn't win, by the way." And I was just like, oh God, that was excruciating.
What way to find out?
And the girl who had won, I know she was taking a Waitrose delivery, and because it was all really delayed, I think the delivery man had arrived outside, so she was just having to do a speech before all the shopping bags came upstairs.
I mean, I think all this, as it's these Zoom or Microsoft Teams meetings and stuff lend themselves to comedy sketches.
I know there's
in and
definitely
of
there's definitely a
themselves,
story there,
definitely.
isn't there? The kind of COVID Zoom
Yeah, exactly.
lockdown world.
So we've got You Had Me at Halloumi is out, and when is What the Focaccia out?
Yeah, so You Had Me at Halloumi's out, and What the Focaccia is coming out next summer. I think it's going to be July. I'm just waiting for my edit notes, actually. And the idea is that this one's about fashion. So it's about a girl who would really like to launch a plus size fashion range, and is struggling to do that in London, and takes it to Milan, and then goes on a bit of a holiday romp around Tuscany. So that was really good fun to write. And yeah, I think I'll be back into the thick of it with edit notes soon. And then that comes out next summer. So
Nice.
hopefully
And
a trip to Italy in the meantime.
Well, I was going to say, you said
that'd
that
be
the Greece and Italy locations were places you hadn't been before, but surely you'll need to pick somewhere nice for book 3 and go and actually travel.
A research trip.
A research trip, exactly.
Exactly.
Expense it all and stuff.
That'd be good. Yeah.
And is it easy for you to jump between sort of editing and then writing something new as well?
Not
Or do you
massively.
park something?
I
while you're
don't know
doing
about
one?
you guys, but I find I can only do one at a time.
Right. Yeah.
Like because I think about it around the clock. Like when I'm lying in bed, falling asleep, and I'm trying to crack like a plot hole or fix something that's broken. I'm terrible at doing two things at the same time. Yeah, so I just think when the edit notes come in, I'll probably just park everything and then just all hands to the pump on the edit notes, hand that back in, and then go back to the book. And I kind of need a weekend break in between to switch brains.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although sometimes that sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but sometimes I was just going to say sometimes that can help when you go back to something that you've not been working on for a while with almost fresh eyes to it. It can show you a different way in or something.
Yeah, I think it'll take me a few days to get back into it again. I was just going to say as well, I know we all have like different ways of working, but when I'm editing my own work, like before I've handed it in to an agent, or to a publisher, I find that when I'm writing, I write at home in silence, and it's really quite boring. I'm very uncool. I don't have a playlist or sit in any like zany cafes, It's just me, the dog, and some peace and quiet. But then when I'm editing it, I quite often have to mail it to myself and read it on a different screen, and then do it when I'm on the fly. So I'll write notes on my iPhone on the way to work. I'll mail myself how far I've got with those 3 chapters, and then just write notes in the notes field. And then when I come back to it, I can probably understand 3/4 of what I've written in terms of notes to myself.
Why is that? Is that because it becomes more like you would normally read a book, or what's the thinking there? Why don't you just sit down in peace and quiet and just go through the edits?
I don't know. I don't really know what it is. I think it's something about reading it in a format where I can't just edit it on the fly.
Okay, so you have to think about it a bit more.
If it's a proper note to myself, I will have to write it down.
Yeah. Okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Cool.
I've definitely I was going to say.
Sorry, no, on you go.
I've definitely found that I quite like when I put it on my Kindle and I'll read it, and it's almost like reading a book, and the problems jump out at me more, I think, because it feels like I'm being critical of a book I'm reading rather than my own writing in a Word document, if that makes sense. It's weird, the kind of psychological.
I think there's something to be said, what you were saying there as well, Kirsty, though, that reading it on something that you can't immediately edit it on is also helpful as well.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you can kind of get stuck into a bit that actually perhaps doesn't need as much changes. I'm very bad at sort of focusing on the sort of micro scale, when in fact it should be more the sort of bigger scale that you're looking at to try and fix something sometimes. So I can see why that works sometimes.
I do think the Kindle is best for that, as Tarek said, actually. and seeing it, on a matte screen rather than
Mhm.
more glare.
Yeah.
Just depends whether it's charged and I can find it.
What was the last book that you read?
Ooh. The last book that I read, I've got a few on the go. The reason I'm stalling is because I find that I've got different ones on the go. So I'm part of a women's feminist book club with my mates, and the last one I read through there was The Lamplighters,
Oh yeah.
Uh-huh.
about the lighthouse keepers and them going missing. So that was really intriguing. And then I find that I also have a stack of women's commercial fiction on the side as well. Norman Foreman has probably been the most recent one there. And that one, he goes up to Edinburgh Fringe in that one as well. It's
Oh,
comedy.
nice.
Yes.
What about the last film that you watched?
The last film that I watched was probably Where the Crawdads Sing.
All right. What are your
Yeah.
thoughts?
Absolutely loved the book. I was in the book to
Mhm.
the point where when I was reading the book, and it's all set obviously in the marshes, I kept thinking, oh, I must tell Adam about that really good film that I've watched. And then realizing later, actually, no, it's the book. It's the book that I'm reading. It's just that it was so visual. And
Yeah,
so
yeah. It's an excellent
in
book. I really
there.
liked it. Yeah. I've
Yeah.
not watched the film though.
The film, I would say, is a decent retelling. It's quite faithful to the book in terms of plot. I just don't understand why she was dressed in perfect white wardrobe. She obviously had a washing machine in the film.
Oh, in the marsh.
Yeah, and was sponsored by Miss Selfridges or something.
Yeah.
Like in the book, she's emaciated and dirty and has, looked after herself since she was 7 years old, I think, in the marshes, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. She's definitely got a washing machine.
But on that thing about a book being very filmic and thinking you've seen a film, I went to see, I think it was was it The Client by John Grisham years and years ago in the cinema. I haven't read the book, and my dad came with me, and we sat there in the first 5 minutes of the film, and he was like, but I've seen this film. This is in the cinema as well. He's like muttering to me, I've seen this. And I'm like, you haven't seen this. It's just out today or something. But it's because he had read the book, and the film obviously opens exactly the same way as the book. And in his head, he had already seen it. So I suppose it shows it was a very accurate adaptation of the book itself. But what about the last TV show that you watched or are watching?
I'm watching Bad Sisters at the moment. Do you know Bad Sisters?
Sharon Horgan TV show.
Yeah.
It's good.
It's brilliant. I think it's a really good piece of comedy about the five sisters who are bumped off their controlling brother-in-law, set in Ireland. I think the original one is based on a Belgian original, I think, that I haven't seen.
All right, okay.
But I think it's brilliant.
Yeah, I'm
the
a big
comedy
fan
in
of
it.
her. I love her stuff.
Yeah. But
am I right in she's made a deal with Apple to make like 5 shows for them or something, because it's per production company, or I'm sure I'd read. It's quite interesting.
Who's Sharon Horgan?
I think so. Yeah, I'm sure I read that. So I'm hoping there's gonna be more stuff coming from her. I don't know if she'll be in all of them or not, but
I'm gonna look that up. Amazing. Yeah.
Well, the very, very last thing we always do on the podcast as well is a super quick fire either or, and I always say there's no right answers apart from one. But we'll start with writing books or writing plays.
Writing books.
TV or cinema?
TV these days, I think.
Yeah. Night owl or early bird?
Early bird. I used to be a night owl and now I've flip-flopped. Yeah.
A fancy restaurant or a takeaway?
Probably a takeaway in front of a good
TV show.
TV show.
Yeah.
And the last one, real book or ebook?
Has to still be a real book, I'm afraid.
Unfortunately, that's the wrong answer. And I was so convinced I was going to have an ebook answer there after you're talking about the Kindle and the lack of glare. I was like, I want a winner here with this one.
No, afraid not, Tarek.
Oh, have I failed?
I'm afraid you have failed, yes.
Afraid that's it. We'll delete the interview.
Yeah,
But what I would
episode
say,
will never
though,
see the light of day now.
When you said ebook or real book, what about audiobook?
I know, we have this conversation a lot. And audiobook is definitely growing. I'm a big fan of them. So if you were to go between real book, ebook, or audiobook,
I honestly think that I've consumed more audiobooks than read real books this last year because we got a dog. And so with the dog
lots of
walking,
Yeah.
I rattle through them.
isn't it?
No, I'm definitely the same. In the last year or so, massively into audiobooks. So,
Yeah.
Some of them I play at very fast speeds, however, if I'm not particularly enjoying
I
it.
always play them at more than one time, at least 1.25 or something, because I feel they talk too slowly. I'm like, hurry up, get to the point, speed the sentence. It doesn't sound like a normal person talking.
Yeah,
it's at normal speed now.
Yeah, I'm a 1.3.
1.3, nice. You push it a little bit faster than me.
And I also have to listen to the sample before I commit to buying the book.
Yeah.
Oh, do you? Okay,
in case the narrator doesn't work.
Yeah, in case it jars.
I should try that because I have had some books and it can be ruined by a bad person reading it.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thanks very much to Kirsty for coming on to the podcast. Really enjoyed that chat. And, I think it always is interesting. We've spoken to, obviously, stand-up comics. We've spoken to some comedy writers. The skill in getting people to laugh. And I think, as I mentioned in the podcast, getting people to laugh at a book in particular is quite difficult, because,
much harder, isn't it?
Yeah, because you're sort of more subdued maybe when you're reading a book. So actually laughing out loud, if that happens, to me, it's like very, very funny. It's at the top of the funny
if you go to see a comedy movie or a stand-up, you're kind of in that comedy zone.
Yes,
you're kind
exactly.
of you're ready to receive the comedy, and you've also maybe been drinking, and it's a whole different vibe. But when
you could have been drinking before you read.
I often get drunk at 11:30 at night in my bed when I'm reading my books. To be honest. Everything's a comedy when you read when you're smashed in your bed.
No, but it is. So it's a tricky thing. A lot of people say that comedy is one of the hardest things to write. Everyone thinks it's easy to be funny, and comedies are often viewed as one of the lower forms of writing almost, in terms of like that you've got literary at the top, but comedy is near the bottom, but it's actually one of the hardest to pull off well.
Oh, totally. Yeah, totally. I think the skill of a comedy is making it look easy. It's
definitely.
Like a light, breezy piece of work, but it's actually a lot of work goes into making it appear like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, you can pick up Kirsty's books, either her books as Kirsty or her books as Ginger, and we've put links to both in the podcast description, or obviously you can pick them up in your local bookshop as well. So thanks again to Kirsty for coming on to the podcast, and next week we have more Romcom chat.
Yeah, we have not only is it more Romcom chat, but it's the start of a 1-2 Christmas book punch.
It is.
Karen Swan is the first up next week, who's written, over 22 books, I think she's written, and a really good writing career, written for Vogue, for You Magazine, etc., Tatler, really interesting way into the industry, and she's written all these books, and she has a really interesting double-hander of a Christmas book and then a non-Christmas book in the summertime, and she does this every year, 2 books a year. It's an incredible output, and it's a really fascinating work ethic she's got.
Yeah, no, it is, and moving as well from journalism into writing books is a path that we've seen before, but it's always interesting hearing, in many ways it can seem a massive advantage, but it isn't always the leg up that you think it is in the industry. So it's a really fun and interesting chat, so please do tune in for that one. If you have enjoyed this episode, however, please make sure and rate and review us on Apple Podcasts and your favourite, or whatever your favourite podcast app is, as that helps us to continue to get great guests on the podcast, and we've got a lot of good ones lined up for you.
Oh yeah, it's going to be a good new year. In the meantime, if anybody wants to get in touch, they can always send us a tweet in the Twitter machine, which is at UK Page 1, Or they can drop us an email, which is podcast@writegear.co.uk.
Or you can find us on Mastodon on writing.exchange under the handle @page1pod.
Sorry, Marco, I just got a pen. Could you say that massive mouthful of a Mastodon handle?
Yeah, well, you're going to have to get used to it when Twitter
I refuse.
becomes...
When Twitter dies, I'm gone. I'm just done. I'm just wiping myself out.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, have a great week and we'll see you next episode.
See you later.
Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode. If you did, please leave a comment down below, hit that thumbs up button, and be sure to hit that subscribe button as well so you never miss an episode like these ones below.
And if you want to get in touch, you can always drop us a tweet in the Twitter machine, which is @UKPage1, as evidenced here, and our other social media channels are available.
Otherwise, we hope to see you next episode.
See you later.